I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and welcome to Esoterica, where we explore the arcane side of history, philosophy, and religion. This interview is a companion piece to my recent episode on the Abramelin ritual. If you haven't had the chance to check that out, you may want to watch that first before watching this interview. I recently had the chance to sit down and chat with Elin Morgan and Keith Reddy of the Boleskine House Foundation. As you'll probably remember, Boleskine House is the Scottish estate that Aleister Crowley purchased at the dawn of the 20th century and began the Abramelin ritual there. Of course, Boleskine House is wonderfully interesting for its link to Scottish history, its connection to Western esotericism in the form of Aleister Crowley, but also Jimmy Page, and all of the developing ideas that have come in the wake of the rise of modern occultism. So by understanding a bit about Boleskine House, its history, its connection to Western esotericism, its destruction by fire, and its reconstruction and renovation, I think we get an interesting glimpse onto the contested nature of heritage, of Western esotericism, and many of the ideas that are central to us here at Esoterica. So I hope you enjoy this interview as a companion to our episode on the Abramelin ritual, and I hope you'll go take a look at the Boleskine House Foundation and consider supporting their work of reconstructing this amazing piece of history with so many connections to many of the ideas that we find interesting here at Esoterica. So let me turn to the interview. So as a part of our exploration of the famed Abramelin ritual, perhaps the most famous instance of that ritual, of course, was the one performed by Aleister Crowley at Boleskine House. And without any doubt, I'm joined by two folks who have a great deal of expertise about Boleskine House, and we're going to talk a good bit about the house, its relationship to Western esotericism, and the future of Boleskine House, which I understand is going to be very much tied in many ways to developments, perhaps, in the study of Western esotericism more generally. So, Elin and Keith, I'm really happy that you guys are coming on Esoterica to talk about Boleskine House. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me and talk about the house.
Thanks, Justin.
Would you guys mind introducing yourselves to folks here at Esoterica? It's a little bit about yourself, and maybe a little bit about your relationship with the study of Western esotericism. I know Keith and I have a shared background in Amsterdam a little bit, and about your relationship to Boleskine House and the foundation.
Great. I'll go first since I kind of started the journey. Like yourself, Justin, I studied at the History of Hermetic Philosophy and Related Currents program at the University of Amsterdam. I did it a little bit later than you. I started in 2013 and did my master's degree there, the research master's actually, which was a 2-year program. Studied under Wouter Hanegraaff and Marco Passi and Peter Forshaw, and had a great experience with that. Found myself very interested in kind of the modern currents of it, I'd say, and sort of how contemporary religiosity was kind of influencing popular culture and things like that. So my master's thesis was actually on Aleister Crowley and the movement after his death, which then ended up becoming a book for a much wider audience than just an academic audience after I finished the program. And that was published in 2018 called One Truth and One Spirit, Aleister Crowley's Spiritual Legacy, which had a lot of critical acclaim, some more critical, some more really positive. But that was kind of my initial journey into academia and Western esotericism. I did my background bachelor's in philosophy. So I did a lot of I was really into the philosophical stuff in my bachelor's, and then decided to go into the religious studies with a really cool program like Amsterdam. And since then, and since I authored the book, had an opportunity, essentially with my wife Kira, while we were just holidaying in Scotland. At the same time, Boleskine House came on the market, and we had the means and ends to essentially not necessarily fund the whole project, but to at least secure the land. And we did so, and decided over deliberating about it over the course of several months while it was under offer and between then and kind of completion, that we would put it into a charity. So I and a number of other people formulated a constitution for a charity, and then put in an application to register the charity with the Scottish Charity Regulator. And that's now been going on for just over a year. And we've since set up the steps to restore Boleskine House. And we have a lot of great ideas for it. And I'm very blessed to have a number of team members who are very dedicated to it, one of which Elin is part of. And I'll hand it off to Elin to kind of introduce herself with what her background and interest in the project.
Cool. So yeah, I'm Elin. I must admit I feel a little bit of an outsider in terms of Western esotericism. I have a personal interest in it, but my academic background is actually in museums and heritage. My specialism is actually kind of art history and curating. I was studying for a PhD in art history and curating whilst also working in a museum as an archivist and a librarian. So I'm basically a history geek and bibliophile who loves books and spends most of their time entirely on their own studying. But yeah, it was when I was studying my PhD, sadly my health took a massive turn for the worse. I was born with an illness that, to look at me, you'd think I was absolutely fine. But to be honest, my daily life is a bit of a struggle. And 5 years ago, my body just screamed out and just said no. And I had to leave work and I had to leave my PhD. And it was devastating, to be honest. I loved my job. I loved working in an archive and in the museum. I loved caring for historical objects. And sort of when I left, I even had a sense of guilt that I was letting those things down. But yeah, after leaving, I kind of spent 5 years having kind of really intensive hospital treatment and physiotherapy, and just feeling a bit lost, really. And then entirely out of the blue, I was visiting a long barrow in Gloucestershire. I was literally about to climb through this sort of really small crawl space. And I got a text from my friend Andy, who's also on the board of trustees for the Boleskine House Foundation. And this text just rather casually said, by the way, have you got any previous experience as a librarian, Elin? And now normally when I'm out and about in nature, I ignore my phone. But this message just sort of got my heart racing, because I was like, yeah, I used to love being a librarian and archivist. And so, yeah, to start with, I actually started volunteering as a library assistant for the Boleskine House Foundation with Andy. And the opportunity to kind of start a collection from scratch of kind of Western esotericism and sort of Scottish Highlands history was just a dream come true, to be honest. I was just a bit like, where did this come from? This is awesome. And then, yeah, from being a library assistant, I then started writing the newsletters for the charity, I think it was in about April 2020. And then Keith asked me if I'd take on an extra role as membership secretary as well. And then a couple of months later, just before my birthday, Keith actually asked me if I'd join the board of trustees. And they had a vote and I was voted in. And yeah, so it's like, here I am, library assistant, membership secretary, trustee, kind of, yeah, ever expanding workload, and just really excited to see where it all goes, because it came from nowhere.
It's really lovely that things conspired in such a way. That's really a great story. That's fantastic. Good for you. That's wonderful. So let's do a little introductions about what Boleskine House is and how it's connected to the history of Western esotericism. This house has a long storied history, both and in terms of just Scottish history more generally, but it has a specifically interesting connection in Western esotericism and to the Abramelin Operation. So, either Keith or Elin, would you want to speak to a little bit about what Boleskine House is and how it ties into this whole saga with Aleister Crowley and the Abramelin?
I'm
Um,
going to hand that to Keith.
yeah, sure, Ellen. Well, it's funny. When I first started down this venture, I obviously decided that I I do this. I want to be involved with the Boleskine House project and the restoration of it, mainly because it was a opportunity of a lifetime, really, to restore this historic building, and it has so much history. But you know, I'll be honest. I was interested in it because I had an intellectual interest already in the study of Western esotericism, and this house was, you know, probably one of the most famous houses that kind of connect that sort of, interest. Um, but as I kind of started learning more about the history, I mean, my interest have broadened uh, to areas of heritage, areas of Highland history, and everything that's kind of gone along with it. But my reason for saying that is essentially I've started generating different hypotheses as to, why Aleister Crowley decided on Boleskine House outside of something else. Because in his biography, he talks about how he scoured the land of all of the UK to find like the perfect magical retreat of a house. But you also have to look and see, anybody who has done some biographical work on Crowley will know that he's a very difficult personality to pin down. He's very ambivalent about a lot of things, and you don't quite exactly know what his intentions are for doing one thing or the other, and he's not exactly explicit. He talks in his literature's in a very sort of Baroque kind of way of talking about the magical Western magical tradition, and even on politics and philosophy and whatnot. So you kind of have to be a little bit of a psychologist and even a psychoanalyst sometimes to kind of understand Crowley and why he chose certain things other than other things. And I have this going theory, and I could be wrong, but at the time that Crowley purchased Boleskine House, it was in 1899. I think it was August or so of 1899. He had been a student at uh, Trinity College at Cambridge for a year, and was highly attracted to alchemy and esoteric stuff. So his friend Julian Baker, who was a chemist, was already a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a prestigious occult secret society in London at the time. And he introduced him to um, um, this group, this organization, and Crowley became a member. He became an initiate member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, a little bit of background. The Golden Dawn stemmed from kind of a sort of occultist trend that was happening throughout the 19th century, that was essentially a form of esoteric discourse that tried to negotiate the sorts of trends of scientific rationalism with religious discourse, and a lot of the mystical currents that had been kind of pushed underground in the modern period, due to all the different processes that happened with the Reformation and so on and so forth. Um, Now that's glossing over a lot of detail, of course, but I'm conscious we don't have a lot of time to go into all of that. But long story short, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was sort of a initiatory society that was kind of quasi-Masonic. It came from Masonry. All the founding members were members of Freemasonry, and they were highly interested in a sort of mystical form of Christianity crossed over with like Egyptian mystery school. And they formulated this very elaborate set of initiation ritualistic scheme that blended Kabbalah and the tarot and astrology and alchemy all into these very elaborate ceremonies. So they kind of position themselves as sort of an initiatic school of teachers that were teaching the ancient wisdom of the Rosicrucians and the Kabbalists and Egyptian mystery schools in these ceremonies. So everything that had to do with very magical things, secret societies, and it was a very kind of prestigious sort of trend, fin de siècle, 19th century. So Crowley being kind of part of a sort of, I guess you could say, a privileged part of class of English society. He came from some money, and he was in a prestigious school in Cambridge, was highly intrigued and wanted to get involved. He was also by the time he was at university, was quite a flamboyant personality, and didn't rub all of the high-minded Londoners the right way all the time when they met. He was very intrigued with poetry and literature, and that was something he was highly driven for. And basically, I'm putting all this background in because essentially my theory is that Crowley was hanging around a lot of literary circles in Cambridge at the time, and something else that was very big on trend at this time was the Celtic Revival, which was sort of neo-Irish and Scottish nationalist circles in the literary movements that was kind of going on. And he started getting involved in this, and his teacher and mentor in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Samuel Mathers, was highly influenced in this. And I think that Crowley was so interested in this sort of Scottish neo-nationalist movement and Celtic revival sort of scenario that he was more interested in purchasing property up in Scotland more than he was in England. And he looked around the Lake District for a little bit in Cumbria and found some things there, but he ultimately decided on Boleskine House. And he decided on that, he claims in his biography, because of the parameters that it gave for this ceremony that he wanted to engage in, which he was introduced to in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which, as we know, is the Abramelin ritual. Allegedly a 15th century text, but we know probably that it's much later, and maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that, Justin. But the premise of the book essentially is a very elaborate set of instructions for a person to go through an austere set of measures and prayers and daily ceremonies to come in contact with what is called in the book the Holy Guardian Angel. And Crowley would interpret this as one of the most important things in someone's spiritual path, to have direct communication with the Holy Guardian Angel, or conversation with, for lack of a better terminology for some viewers, maybe God, So he purchased Boleskine House. He set up his temple in this place, and he went to engage in it. And Crowley was quite flighty, of course, in his young student of the occult and university student years. And I think he lasted about 2 months. And this ceremony was meant to go on for 6 months, every day of chaste daily prayer. I mean, we're talking about you get up at 4 in the morning and you eat a piece of bread and fast the rest of the day so that you can come into contact with this entity, this guardian angel. And at the time, at the time also, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, he wasn't jiving well with the people in London where he had started. So they were sort of not interested in putting him forward for further levels of initiation. So MacGregor Mathers, the head of the Golden Dawn, was in Paris and invited Crowley to Paris at that time, and to go take these further initiations. And so Crowley dropped everything at Boleskine and went to go take this initiation. And he never fully finished the ceremony. And of course, the spooky legends that kind of come out of that is that he never closed the magical circle, and all these malevolent forces came into the world and wreaked havoc on Loch Ness. So
Yeah, it's a fascinating aspect that he basically was only doing the ritual for about 2 months, and it's made this enormous imprint in the history of modern occultism, where it's now become this incredibly legendary thing. And in fact, it's only a couple of months that he's doing this. Elin, have you guys recovered archivally or at the literary level material from the Crowley period about Boleskine House, like deeds or other things like that have been recovered?
Well, to be honest, yeah, part of a curator's job is everything has to be based on meticulous kind of academic research. Because I kind of joined the project a bit later, Keith is kind of more aware of the kind of records. I'm sort of helping archive them. But that's kind of what happens with being a curator, even if it's not your knowledge base. It sort of has to become it, because as part of a heritage project, a huge part of that is actually communicating the sort of heritage of the place to people. And so, yeah, if you haven't got that research and those documents, then how are you going to help the public to understand what happened? But as I said, Keith's in a better position to talk about the documents, really, because he's been on it longer than me.
I actually don't have a lot of information myself. There's a guy out of Edinburgh who's doing some great research on Boleskine House and Crowley's time at Boleskine House. Andrew Wiseman, who's done several articles in our journal, and he's currently writing a book on Crowley's time at Boleskine. And he's got some really good history on just stuff before Crowley and even after Crowley. And he's given us basically a list of all the different people. Funny enough, going back to, Crowley, the Englishman, Crowley, embracing some Scottish roots, he took to Highland life very easily when he moved up there. And and on all the deeds of Boleskine, it's either Aleister MacGregor or MacGregor Crowley or Aleister MacGregor Crowley, and it's varying throughout the years that he owned it, but there was always MacGregor in the name on the title deed.
Is that a reference to MacGregor Mathers, or is that him just adopting a Scottish pseudonym?
It's hard to say whether he was trying to say that he was akin to. I mean, it's obviously donning the same surname that Samuel Mathers did, and he took. I mean, when Crowley bought Boleskine, he took to Highland life immediately. He was hunting, and he was, dressing up in Scottish attire, and You know, he went by the name McGregor, and you know, it must have been all very eccentric for
Can
the
only
local
imagine what the locals
at that
thought.
time.
Can only imagine what the locals thought. This guy moving up to the highlands to do this ritual, and um, you have the same thing sometimes with, I think, Heidegger. Martin Heidegger famously also would adopt this uh, Swabian accent and dress like a sort of a German peasant and things like this. One wondered what the German peasants thought about this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a funny, yeah. If you don't have a flair for the dramatic, then you really can't really get involved too much with you know, hermetic magic and stuff. I feel like those two things have to go hand in hand at some level.
There's some funny stories about what he did when he moved up. You know, this is before. I mean, the Loch Ness monster kind of stuff kind of came up in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
So this is long before that. This is 1900 we're talking about. But he used to put signs up around the estate saying, "Beware of the ichthyosaurus," you know, which was like this prehistoric sea monster, you know. He used to put this up so people going by in wagon, I guess at that time, or on foot or whatever, would see this. They'd be like, "What?" You know.
Yeah, and also, of course, it's Boleskine is right on Loch Ness, so I mean, you get the great overlap of Aleister Crowley and Jimmy Page and the Loch Ness monster. So that's a power team if there ever was one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So maybe tell us a little bit about the Boleskine House Foundation and what it's doing and what it's up to these days, and sort of where the house is. I'm sure that many people watching this will know that the house is basically was ruined through a series of fires, probably arson, unfortunately, and the house was basically destroyed, with I think basically with the exception of the exterior, I think, and you all, along with I think an army of volunteers, have been pretty systematically cleaning it up, and I think it also has just recently been deemed not a dangerous site anymore,
Mhm.
which is a really important moment in that process. So tell us a little bit about the Boleskine House Foundation and your respective roles in the foundation.
Elin, you want to go for it?
Okay. I suppose I think I'll start with also, I suppose, just being quite open that I've only been to Boleskine twice, but the kind of most amazing experience was in November, December last year. I spent 5 weeks there, living in my camper van, kind of on site. And so, as well as all the admin stuff that I was talking about that I do behind the scenes, kind of being there was incredible to actually kind of work on site. And I was just doing simple things. It was just helping clear the wall head of the kind of charred remains and debris left from the fires, so that when the masons come in and can't start consolidating that wall head, it will be strong enough to take the roof. But what was amazing about being there and doing it was, firstly, it was kind of like my old job, but on a massive scale and outside. So whereas before, working with restoring sculptures and documents and things like that, preparing conservation reports, and also taking part in the conservation at times as well. So it's sort of like doing that on a massive scale. And like I said, there's something kind of really satisfying and sort of humbling as well about caring for a piece of heritage. And kind of why I say that kind of is because heritage is kind of imbued with the sort of force of history that it sort of came from. And so you can read about Boleskine House in a book, or you could listen to someone talk about Boleskine House, but it's not the same as actually being there. Like, heritage gives you this sort of tangible experience of the intangible. And I don't mean anything preternatural or even spooky about that. I just mean literally kind of heritage gives us access kind of to a kind of force of history. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip of water.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it was a bit like back when I was working in the art gallery, one kind of example of how kind of a heritage object can kind of give you this kind of tangible experience of the intangible is the University of Birmingham, in its archaeology department, has got this little Greek ceramic. It dates to, I think it was circa 600 BC. And it's a little pot. It contains a depiction of Dionysus, or Dionysus, however you want to pronounce his name, or Bacchus, to use the more pronounceable Roman name. But what's wonderful about this pot is it's got a thumbprint on it. Like, well, I say on it, in it, you can see a mark of the person that made it. And kind of, again, when you see a photograph of that, it's still cool. You're like, whoa, okay, that's an index of someone from kind of thousands of years ago making something. When you actually hold it, it's different, because you're sort of brought into contact with the existence of somebody else that's no longer there. And so it's a bit like that at Boleskine. Like, kind of each owner has kind of modified the house. So, I mean, Keith will probably talk about it. Crowley kind of put a door into one of the sides where there needed to be one. And Jimmy Page, I think, I can't remember now if he knocked down or rebuilt room 1, I've forgotten. But each kind of, the building bears marks of each owner and also sort of tells its own history. So kind of as we were clearing the wall head as well, we found different nails, and these nails help us date different parts of the house, which help us kind of discover the chronology of how that house was built and how it was adapted over time.
You would have never thought that that a fire would actually produce something very positive about the archaeology of the building, but because of all the plasterings being burnt away, you're able to see different periods that the house had been built on and reconfigured and whatnot. So we think that it had started as just a 3-tiered building with just a central room and then those bayed windows. And then Archibald Fraser, who's credited for commissioning the house, he was the one who probably put in that corridor. So there was a corridor then, and then some wings put on the side, and then some corner rooms that are lock facing adjacent to the original structure, and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting that the building has been telling its story of its entire history only recently, and I think that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's really, like you said, it's unfortunate. You know, the upside of the fire is that it revealed, you know, the sort of the larger story of this home, which is really just incredible on its own. What kind of things survive from the Crowley period? Notice Elin mentioned the door that he had put in there in one of the oratory room, but what other kinds of things survive from the Crowley period, or what evidence did Crowley leave behind of his ownership?
I think the answer to that is very little that we were able to see, because most everything burnt away, and what wasn't burnt away, we know from the neighbors after the 2015 fire that cars were just lining up to pillage the place. By the time we purchased it and came to site to clean it up in 2019, there was really hardly anything there other than just stuff that you wouldn't take, you know.
Yeah, is there any sense of what have there been any further investigations about who or how those fires got started, the ones that ultimately destroyed it? Because what I've read is that it was probably arson, but is there any sense of who might have done it? Or...
Yeah, the more recent one is suspected arson, but the one prior, the main one in 2015 is suspected to have just started by either a boiler or a storage heater or something kind of over in the kitchen area. So like the northwestern part of the building is thought to have just been accidental. Apparently the person who owned it, she was from the Netherlands, and it happened during the holidays, not much before Christmas of 2015. And from what I understand, she and a relative were in town in Inverness, which is at least 30-40 minutes away, doing some shopping, you know. and came back and it was on fire. So um, that burnt about 70% of the house. There was about 30% of it still intact on the opposite side of the house, the south side. And then basically 5 days after I completed the purchase of the land, someone came in and apparently started a fire. And police have still not been able to identify the person. So they're still at large. They had a lead on someone, but they couldn't fully connect the evidence. So, I mean, that roof would have had to come off anyway, but
Right.
you know, it still is. It left a lot of damage in the wake. And the thing, going back to your last question, Justin, you know, kind of what stage we're at with the building right now is, it's only been recent. And when I say recent, I mean probably late spring of 2020 that we've been able to do any sort of, like, you know, positive application towards the building, meaning actual getting in and starting to do rebuilding work. All of 2019 and half of 2020 was actually removing everything from the building. And I mean, we're talking about 28-ton skips filled to the brim of rubbish, removed by hand, I should say, you know, with wheelbarrows and shovels and whatnot, with a handful of volunteers. So it's been a real testament of will to actually see. And I know it sounds crazy to a lot of people, like, 'cause a lot of people ask me, why are you doing this? But I just kind of wanted to see if it could be done, you know. I mean, when in your existence will you be cleaning out, you know, 400 square meters of top to bottom fire damage debris, you know? And we were able to do it, you know, and it was an accomplishment in and of itself. So now what we're doing is we have the first stage of rebuilding, which is masonry repairs, and that will prepare us for a roof hopefully by the end of the year.
Wow. And is it very weather dependent? I know that Scotland's not hailed for its wonderful winter weather, so I imagine that process is at some level very much seasonal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The frost thaw cycles are detrimental to the listed fabric of the building. So that granite has been exposed for half a decade now, and its integrity is worsening with every winter. So last winter wasn't terrible, but this one's proving to be a lot worse. Getting a lot of snow, we're getting a lot of frost, and we're just doing what we can to get it sorted before it gets worse. But you know, we're basically repointing everything, we're rebuilding everything with traditional lime mortar, which is what it would have originally been put up with. We had a hell of a time taking all the white render. Everyone sees it with a white render on it, but that was actually concrete render that should have never been put on the granite to begin with, and was actually suffocating the fabric for years. So we've taken that all off, and it's, for the first time in who knows how many years, it's breathing again. And then we'll re-render it with a traditional lime mortar. So we're trying to do what we can to kind of stick with its historical integrity of how it would have been in Archibald Fraser's time and Aleister Crowley's time.
And to speak a bit more about Aleister Crowley and the religion that he founded, Thelema, Boleskine is a sacred location in the religion of Thelema. And so the organization has the unique task, I would say, of not only stewarding a historical building, but also stewarding a holy site in some ways. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that. If you guys could speak to that that kind of heritage, right? And that's a really interesting kind of heritage where it's it's connected to Scottish history, it's connected to Western esotericism, it's connected to music history at some level with Jimmy Page, which is also intersects with Western esotericism as well. And then on the top of that, it is a holy site, and so it's an interesting kind of intersection of lots of different heritage related issues. So I don't know if Elin or Keith would like to speak to that. I just find that part of it to be incredibly fascinating, and that part to be incredibly fascinating. So
yeah, shall I start, Keith?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, kind of to be a sort of curator in charge of heritage building that is also a kind of holy site. In short, it's massive. It's what comes to mind is Spider-Man and his Uncle Ben telling him, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a really big undertaking. Kind of heritage is complex, it's contested, and it's a communicative act. And so because of that, it involves choices that have far-reaching ramifications. And sadly, often those choices are sometimes based on kind of slightly sinister ideology and power structures that kind of start to interfere with kind of impartial kind of heritage approach. And it's really important because, yeah, sometimes these entrenched ideas can actually become inherited by future generations who have little understanding of why they think something, where that idea came from. It becomes so entrenched that it becomes sort of fact, and people don't understand it. And so heritage has the kind of the decision of what to preserve, how to preserve it, and how to present that to the public is kind of representative of every generation's kind of view of what's significant, what's important, why the past should be preserved and passed on to future generations. And I suppose I don't want to kind of go off too much topic from Western esotericism, and something that I find interesting about heritage, maybe others won't, so do stop me if I kind of go off too much. But what's interesting is history, and museums and heritage is a kind of comparatively new discipline. To take a very Eurocentric and British view, and I'm aware that I'm talking to two Americans right now, they kind of talk about the birth of museums as being when the British Museum was opened in 1753. We have, right, that's the birth of museums. And then about a century later, a little bit longer, 1877, we have the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings in Britain. And so we take this as the birth of the sort of heritage sector. Now, the key point is that both of those, the British Museum and the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings in Britain, were founded upon the principle that preserving heritage and promoting historical education is important because it helps us understand where we are now, and it also helps us understand and imagine the kind of future. The idea that we learn from the past, or hopefully we do anyway. But it's also interesting that, so while we've had these institutions kind of since the 18th century and 19th century, it's only in the last sort of 10, 20 years that the sector has actually started to become quite self-reflective and sort of opening up, and kind of what was previously a little bit restrictive is kind of becoming kind of much more self-aware. And in 2008, we had the, let me get the title right, it's the, there it is, the ICOMOS Charter for the Interpretation and Presentation of Cultural Heritage Sites. So this was published in 2008, and then it was updated in 2013. And I'm just going to read you the sort of 5 principles that were put in, because they help. I am getting back to Boleskine, don't worry. They do sort of help explain why it's a big responsibility. Okay, so the first principle is that interpretation should explore the significance of a site in its multifaceted historical, political, spiritual, and artistic contexts. Number 2, the contributions of all periods to the significance of the site should be respected. Number 3, interpretation should take into account all groups that have contributed to the historical and cultural significance of the site. Number 4, intangible elements of the site's heritage must be considered. Now, intangible elements are customs, beliefs, spiritual values. And number 5, the cross-cultural significance, as well as the range of perspectives about them, must be based on scholarly research, ancient records, and that living traditions should also be involved in the formation of interpretive programs. Okay, so that's the kind of 5 core principles. And then in 2013, 2 more were added. And one is the significant associations between people and a place should be respected, retained, and not obscured. Opportunities for the interpretation, commemoration, and celebration of these associations should be investigated and implemented. And number 2, significant meanings, including the spiritual values of a place, should be respected, and opportunities for the continuation or revival of these meanings should be investigated and implemented. Now, for me, when I first kind of was learning about this back at uni, it sort of hit me. It was a bit of a sort of bucket of cold water moment when you realize just how much responsibility there is kind of working in museums. Like, it's big stuff. And not only that, once you start working at them, you also really fast find out kind of just how emotionally charged and fraught it is as well. Like, heritage gets people super excited and super angry in equal measure and at the same time. And it's sort of important to note that the kind of these charters that lay down these things, so like number 1, that interpretation should explore the significance of a site in its multifaceted historical, political, spiritual, and artistic context. You can sort of bet your money that if a charter had to put that kind of into practice, it's because in the past that was being ignored. That in the past, a kind of more restrictive approach, that you have a heritage building, it tells one story in a bite-sized, easily digestible way that kind of visitors just passively absorb as they walk around the place. That's kind of how it used to be done. And so, yeah, in the past kind of 10, 20 years, they're sort of trying to open that up. And so, yeah, if I kind of apply these principles to Boleskine House, well, to be honest, it's sort of poof, really. It's kind of, it's big, and you also know that it's going to cause controversy, not least because of Aleister Crowley. He is a polarizing personality. There's a kind of discourse of love him, hate him kind of going on. But also Western esotericism is a kind of marginalized subject as well. And so you've got this sort of double marginalization with Boleskine House, that you've got to respect its sort of spiritual meaning for a lot of people. And I'm aware that I'm not here to upset Thelemites, or indeed the kind of opposite angle that sort of, there's a lot of people out there that have this belief that Boleskine House is literally the material manifestation of evil and the home of the devil. There's this sort of backlash against the spirituality that says this place is evil. And I don't want to upset anyone that has spiritual values for the place, but also it would be wrong to also upset the people that hold the kind of backlash ideology that it's an evil place as well. What's important is to sort of really look into where that entrenched idea that this place is evil and that Crowley was a Satanist, you've got to look into where that came from, and you've got to help people to understand kind of what that ideology, what it served at the time that it was created, and why it gets passed on. And so kind of Keith would sort of say that we had a wonderfully bizarre encounter with just how het up people get about Boleskine House when we submitted a planning application, which was basically to put the roof on the house. it was mental, for want of a better word. But again, no disrespect to people who hold these beliefs. They are their opinions and they are entitled to them. The point is that kind of ideology can become so entrenched that, yeah, people all over the world, there were people in New Zealand, there were people in America, there were people in kind of England, in Scotland, everywhere, were writing to a district council to basically, and believing they were doing the right thing, to sort of decry that Boleskine House is run by Satanists for Satanists. And they were willing to sort of have Boleskine destroyed because of this idea. And so you've even got sort of Scottish people that in their letters were sort of saying about how it's got nothing to do with Scottish history, it's all about Crowley. They're sort of willing to throw away a piece of Scottish heritage because a guy that they've heard something that makes them uncomfortable owned this building for about 20 years in an entire history that spans back at least to the 13th century, and also the house that goes back to 1809. Crowley owned it for about 20 years, but people get so sort of angry and het up, they're willing to kind of, yeah, just chuck all of that history out of the window and just proclaim it as evil. And it's like, when I came on board with this project, like I said, I'm not a Crowley expert by any stretch. I do find him fascinating though, and it's wonderful to learn from Crowley experts such as Keith. But yeah, I knew it was going to be controversial because heritage always is. But I can't say I expected our sort of first taste of that to all have exploded on an online planning portal for the district council in the Highlands. And I'd also bet that the Highland councillors didn't see that coming either.
Yeah, I'm not sure who I pity more. You guys having to try to get this thing done, or the poor Highland Council who's like, what is going on?
It's funny to note too that it's not just the ones who think that it's Satanist rebuilding a satanic temple, but it's also the diehard Crowleyites who, believe it or not, some of them are against the project, and it could be for intergroup political reasons, or it could be literally like some kind of fundamentalist interpretation of the Book of the Law that Crowley penned in 1904 that somehow insinuates that the house should be an invisible house and shouldn't actually be rebuilt, and I mean, that just kind of tells you some stories about it tells you further commentary on like religion and how religion sort of operates on
No, right. It's and again, I can't say that I envy y'all. This is an incredibly difficult thing to navigate, and that's not just counting the business of having to restore a mansion that's hundreds of years old.
It's not worrying about people breaking an arm on a scaffold or
right, or
an eye or something like that on
right.
site.
Yeah, the normal sorts of things that go along with renovations. But yeah, I find this is an interesting sort of overlap, right? Where Keith, both of us studied under Walter Hanegraaff, and one of his big ideas, of course, is that Western esotericism is all about contested knowledge. And it seems like what Boleskine House is doing is an interesting way. Is being a kind of contested heritage. Who gets the right? Who gets the ability to decide? Where does one restore this building to, and how, and to what end, and etc. And that's just to me, that's a really fascinating overlap, both theoretically on the side of thinking about Western esotericism, but also to Elin's point about sort of like that heritage is never one thing. It's always something that at some level we're inheriting, and at some level we're always transforming, and you never just get one history. History is kind of sort of a massive heap of things moving forward, and when you're having to make decisions about how to restore a building, every decision you make is not making some other decisions. And so I find that that process, and what's really neat is that because things are the way they are, the documentation of that process is itself part of the history of that entire thing. So this is just, I find just the restoration work that you guys are doing and the whole project of Boleskine House to be fascinating both in its contact to Western esotericism, but also how we can see some of the theoretical ideas being discussed about Western esotericism itself playing itself out in this grand project.
It's funny that I think Wouter recently elegantly said, Western esotericism, or the esotericists were the losers of history.
Mm.
Basically meaning that prior to the modern period, and I dare say prior to the Protestant Reformation, philosophies that were mystical, Neoplatonism and Hermeticism and all these kind of, for lack of a better term, pagan philosophies were actually quite dominant for most of human history, all the way through Renaissance. And it was because of the anti-apologists to the Catholic Church. They kind of lumped their arguments against the Catholic Church of being kind of in bed with all these pagan philosophies that came from Plato and Aristotle and and so on and so forth. So it essentially relegated esoteric discourse into the underground since the 18th century. And it only kind of bubbled up to the surface every now and again throughout the 19th century and again in the 20th century. So it's really struggled to kind of legitimize itself in kind of the mainstream academic circles only until recently, as you know. So it has essentially been contested knowledge or contested epistemology throughout a great deal of our modern history for several centuries now. And what's funny about Boleskine is it fits in that because of its history with Aleister Crowley's ownership, and Aleister Crowley being a part of sort of the Western esoteric discourse and a big part of Western esoteric discourse, late 19th century and into the 20th century. And he was a contemporary of the interwar period, which was a whole other sort of dynamic of how esotericism sort of kind of played part in sort of the anti-fascist and even pro-fascist sort of paradigms with esoteric discourses, as James Webb has pointed out in his works on the occult underground and everything. But what's funny is that because Boleskine also stands as a piece of heritage, as Elin points out, heritage is part of the humanities, and the humanities in general, whether it's philosophy or history or religious studies or whatever it is always got controversial elements to it, and we're basically sitting at a very interesting place where the controversial contested epistemology of Western esotericism is kind of crossing over with the more broad contested heritage aspect of history and controversial aspects of history that we see playing out in like the main news right now with statues being brought down and thrown into rivers and all this kind of stuff. So it's challenging, but it's also really, really exciting too, and it gives us a really interesting place to kind of speak from on an academic and intellectual level to sort of try to broaden the general base of knowledge about how we understand heritage and its importance, and also broaden the perspective of Western esotericism and all these corners of history that have had major influences on major world events that nobody ever really even considered before until recently.
Yeah, I mean, I I really do think we're at one of the most exciting periods of time for the study of esotericism, just in general. So and this maybe will segue into my last question is what does the foundation think about the future of Boleskine? What's the rough timeline for the building being renovated, completed, and what's the long-term vision, if there is one, for what will the future of Boleskine look like? We spent a lot of time talking about the past, but the future is a really long place too, and I wonder what that future looks like for Boleskine.
Want to go first there, Ellen?
Okay, I mean, one of the things again about conservation, restoration, and heritage is this idea that kind of, yeah, so you've got the sort of force of history and you've got the forms of heritage, and these two things kind of interplay kind of constantly. And with a restoration project, what I really like is you get this sort of renewed but also new life. So Boleskine's going to get restored to how it looked kind of back in the day, but in so doing you're creating a new life too, and a new history with everything that we're doing. And that the sort of possibilities of that is what's sort of simultaneously exciting and a bit, whew, this is big. But certainly for me, from a heritage perspective, but also from a kind of philosophical one, I kind of envision a really sort of socially inclusive future for Boleskine, where kind of people that are interested in history or philosophy, kind of Highlands history, Crowley, kind of all of it, any part of Boleskine's long and varied history, people that are interested in that can come and sort of have that tangible encounter sort of with the past in situ, in context. They can kind of take part on a guided tour and kind of learn about it. And that's where our responsibility comes in on what we present on that guided tour. But also for me as well, is kind of the location of it. Like, oh my days, it is in the most beautiful spot with mountains opposite and Loch Ness. And kind of when the Boleskine House Foundation also kind of restores the house, it's going to restore the grounds as well. So it's sort of about enjoying that sort of nature as well, which is also kind of links in with kind of well-being and also sort of philosophy. Take some time out in nature. And then also for me, as a bit of a bibliophile and a geek, is I'm really excited that there's going to be a library and an archive there. So you've got a heritage building that you can go on a guided tour and kind of learn about it, but it's also got a library and archive. So then you can choose that level of engagement. You can sort of tap in and look behind the walls and kind of learn everything sort of around Western esotericism and Boleskine House and Scottish history. And just, yeah, for a bibliophile geek like me, that is ineffably exciting.
Very cool.
I think one of the two main points that I'd like to see as far as the vision goes are two topics. One is learning and education, and really promoting like historical research and historical knowledge and you know, humanities, but also you know, health and well-being. I mean, there's a level of connection of holistic kind of health and well-being that you get by being in this bucolic landscape of the Scottish Highlands. And one of the things we were able to secure with the planning application was the building of 10 eco lodge tourist accommodation. And this will be for families and for couples and for individuals who want to kind of get out in nature and kind of a sort of, you know, luxury Loch Ness retreat that's in kind of like a sort of log style cabin, and just like enjoy themselves. But you know, with Ellen and my and the trustees' backgrounds and kind of interest in meditation and yoga and esoteric stuff, it's you know, sort of intellectual kind of academic sort of driven thing to kind of help bring more consciousness to local history and the discipline and academic discipline of Western esotericism, but also kind of promoting health and well-being, and allowing that sort of thing to be there as well. So it's kind of funny. I've always been kind of influenced by the sort of Aranus lectures, that kind of happened, and they had their own problems as well. They were that all that stuff was kind of operating, during World War II, and it was on the border of Germany and Switzerland. So they weren't without their problems. So there's definitely lessons that can be learned from Aranus. But the idea of what those circles of discussion was about, with I mean, major luminaries like Carl Jung and Rudolf Otto and Mircea Eliade and Gershom Scholem and Henry Corbin, all massively intelligent scholars of these esoteric discourses. Is really the birth of the modern academic study of Western esotericism. So I would love to see seminars and talks and academic lectures on things like that at the site. And also, maybe a little less granola version of the Elin stuff too, where it was, promoting health and well-being, and, allowing for a space for yoga classes, or meditation or things like that, So I think there's 35 acres there to work with. There is a lot of land that can benefit the local community, with gardening and vegetable gardens and health retreats and things like that. So there's just a lot of things that we could do, and those are really big ideas that are kind of in the sky right now, but it's obviously a place of international interest, and it has a lot of opportunity to make that happen. As far as timescales to finish the house, we hope to get it wind and watertight and a shell of what it looked like before by the end of the year. The internal fit out is another story. I think that's going to be more a case of cash flow, because the purpose of the tourist accommodation is not only to fill a demand for the local need for accommodation, and kind of helping invest economically in the local area as far as that's concerned, but also to have a source of income that will help fuel the internal fit out of the house. So that could be, several years from now, but we're getting along pretty well so far. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it's a very exciting project, and I'm really really excited that such cool, smart, thoughtful people are engaged in this restoration. So it's really exciting. Both that Boleskine will live again and have a new history and a new kind of life. So that's really, really fascinating for me. So well, I guess I want to take the time to thank both of you for taking the time to chat with me about Boleskine and the adventures that you guys are going on in the restoration of this house and the maintenance and history of the heritage there. And where can folks find out more about the foundation?
So our website is www.boleskinehouse.org, BOLESKINE house.org. And we're also on Facebook and all the social media channels, as much as I try to stay off social media these days. We are on there. And that's basically facebook.com/boleskine.house.foundation.
Very cool. And I'll include a link in the description below where folks can find Boleskine House Foundation and get involved if you folks want to.
Yeah, Elin might be able to say a word about our Friends of Boleskine program.
Yeah, please, Elin, please. I am a member, so signed up just recently to be one of the Friends of Boleskine House, because I'm also very enthusiastic about this project. So Elin, yeah, tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't really be doing my job as membership secretary if I didn't mention the fact that we have a membership program. So yeah, there's Friends of Boleskine House. If you go to our website and click on the top where it says membership, Friends of Boleskine House, we've got two types of membership, gold and silver, and you can pay annually or monthly. Gold membership gets you 2 issues a year of our journal, Boleskine, and also unlimited visits to the property kind of once it's fully opened, and then obviously more future possibilities with events and things like that. But joining us kind of, it just really helps because it kind of, we're creating a sort of sense of community kind of with social media as well, but also it's a massive project and it's a huge cost to do. This is a huge building and it hasn't got a roof. It's not kind of small potatoes to rebuild it. And so actually the vital contributions of members are really important to us to help us give Boleskine that renewed life.
Yeah, I'll include a link to the membership page as well in the description. So highly encourage folks to check that out. This is a really neat project. So, well, that said, again, thank you both for taking the time to chat with me here at Esoterica, and we'll hopefully do more interviews with folks in the future. So, that said, I will send you guys off, and for viewers, thank you so much for tuning in to Esoterica.
Well, I hope you found our conversation about Boleskine House, its heritage and its development and its future interesting. I have to say that I'm very excited about the idea of Boleskine House becoming a center for something like the study of Western esotericism, where both academics and practitioners can be in a kind of dialogue with one another. I find that to be amazingly interesting. So I hope you'll consider taking a look at the Boleskine House Foundation. There's a link in the description to consider supporting their work. Until next time, I'm Dr. Justin Sledge, and you've been watching Esoterica, where we explore the arcane in history, philosophy, and religion.